Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery. He's always with me, but we have a guest. You folks might remember Greg Ellis. We're going to talk some SEC football here in a little bit and a lot of other things with Greg, who is, technically he's a civilian, Tupelo Public Schools. He's not media anymore. But if you've noticed, there is a hot new SEC blog that is taking Facebook by storm. It's Greg's SEC Shakedown. Hey, folks, we got a lot to talk about in the next half hour or so. Greg's going to be with us for a little bit of that. Greg, tell us about the shakedown, man. You can take the boy out of the SEC, but you can't take the SEC out of the boy.
I guess not, Parrish. It's something I have fun with, and I do, and it makes me keep up with all the SEC games, on Saturday because, as you know, we can watch everything now. There's nothing you can't watch anymore. So it's something I just try to have a little fun with and stir some conversation.
Well, has it been unusual in the sense to be able to air public opinions? Because I think you were kind of restricted in that as a media relations assistant for 10 or 12 years. Is that a little bit different?
Yeah, it is, and I'm still careful with what I say. I'm not going to be negative or go out, too far on a limb. It's just one man's opinion, and it's just something I want to have fun with, keep up, and see how the shakedown unfolds every week.
Logan, it's good to see Greg on here, but man, he's come on and shamed us right away with the dress code.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring the dress code even down further. You're wearing a collar, Parrish. I'm not even doing that. I got a hat and just a gym shirt on, and Greg's sitting there in a coat and tie, and I'm just going to bring the dress code really far down. But Greg, I wanted to ask you, what's it like being a civilian now and just being outside of the media? What was that first Saturday like when you're not involved with from the media standpoint or an SID standpoint?
Guys, it is so different. I actually have a life now, and I kind of enjoy it. I had a couple of friends of mine reached out to me who were in the business and got out, and they gave me some advice. And they said, do not go to a football game the first couple of games. It will drive you nuts because you're supposed to know what is happening, when it's supposed to happen. You're probably going to be critical, and you're going to be restless. So the first two Mississippi State home games, I tell you, I didn't miss it, especially with the heat. I enjoyed sitting at home and channel surfing, and more than anything, going to bed when I want to go to bed, not 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
It's definitely been some late nights.
Yes, exactly.
Well, look, Greg, not a lot of people work in newspaper or in media and then see the other side with media relations. I've always felt that that I would enjoy the relationships with the athletes and coaches on that side. And that's something that years ago in newspaper you were able to experience a little bit, but times have changed. Things are very different regarding access and availability of coaches and players and whatnot. Just give us a comparison and contrast of newspaper and then media relations.
Well, Parrish, I think a lot of that goes back to the invention of the cell phone and the smartphones where everything was open. And so you kind of had to be careful, from a media relations standpoint of the access given because a video, anything could be taken. But you're right, it's the relationships. And I love my players and coaches, and we still talk. And the two worlds, while they are different, there are a lot of similarities. I mean, it's the news business. And as you've seen colleges evolve over the last 5 or 6 years, trying to be their own news entity with hiring writers and everything. But, it's all about relationships in anything. And that was the big key for me, was to develop those relationships, not just with the players and coaches, but the media. And I think having been on the other side, that gave me an advantage as to maybe someone coming in who hadn't worked, on the journalistic side of it before.
Tell us, communications, Tupelo Public School District, what's a day in the life of Greg Ellis in the new job?
Oh, man, there is no 2 days. Of course, we've got 14 schools here in the district and about 7,000 students, and we do videos every week. We do stories. A lot of it's what I've always done. We oversee the website, all the social media, getting news out, story ideas out. And you guys at the Journal have been awesome to deal with Dylan and Chris and Justin. And I really enjoyed seeing the non-sports side of this industry because, guys, I've never not been in sports. So this has been new for me, and I'm about to wrap up, my 10th week. But I absolutely love it. Dr. Piku, the new superintendent, I love his vision, and he has been awesome to work with. And everybody is on the same page here. And Parrish, you got a wife that teaches in this district, and you've had 2 kids benefit from this district. So you know how important Tupelo schools are.
Yeah. Of course, we've seen 2 kids go through the district, and those are good times. Greg, no, you've got to get off and do some Tupelo Public School District stuff, and we're going to get you there in a couple of minutes. But before you go, shake down Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Give some real observations now because you're not in house anymore. What have you seen with the Bulldogs and the Rebels through 3 games?
Well, what stands out for Mississippi State, and obviously I'm not going out on a limb, is their defense. They're just so solid up front. Logan can go in a little more detail about some injuries, so it'll be interesting to see how the secondary performs this week. I think Kentucky's a pretty good football team. To go to Florida, to beat Florida. But the key for State is it's not giving up the big play defensively, particularly up front with the run game. And offense, we saw a big improvement with Fitzgerald from the second game at Kansas State, to last week. He looked more comfortable. Obviously, the level of competition wasn't as good. But, you've got your 2 gimmies and your 1 Power 5 school out of the way, and now it gets real. It was good to see Williams back running the ball and the things that he can do. So you've got a nice 1-2 punch. For Ole Miss, that defense is bad. I mean, it is really bad, and I don't know how a D1 defense can get that bad. But I love their offense. I love their quarterback. I think we all saw how good Alabama is. Now, is Alabama that good and Ole Miss that bad? Probably not. But, when things snowball, they snowball. And it just got out of hand real quickly. But if I'm Ole Miss and in those situations, I look for a way to sustain drives and not always go for the the quick 6.
Logan, got anything to say to Greg? How nice it's been since he's been gone?
It's been so wonderful to have Greg out of the way and just not have to deal with him on a day-to-day basis. No, we love Greg, miss Greg, and look forward to seeing him around Starkville. I know you'll probably be back for some basketball games and stuff. If you're not enjoying sitting on that couch too much during those games and want to get in bed at a decent time, I know you got to get up early in the mornings and stuff now.
Yeah, my hours are a little different. We come in at 7:30 every morning, and I'm usually out of here by 5. But the big difference is I'm not going home worrying about something happening on social media or a player getting in trouble or a coach doing something. It's like I go home and I can actually shut it down for a while, and I really do enjoy that.
Greg, I wouldn't make it having to show up at a job at 7:30 in the morning.
We know it's not for everybody. I understand.
I could do it, Greg. I could be there at 7:30. Hey, look, one more thing before we let you go, man. I will say that I always expected a high degree of efficiency with MSU basketball from a media standpoint when you were there. And you say there are similarities in both jobs, and I agree because I can look at almost anybody's press row and tell you how things could and should be differently. Did you get some of that when you were a media relations assistant?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would send out every year after the season to the media, hey, what are things that we can do better? Because I'd go to some schools, and obviously I'm not going to say which schools, but it was annoying on how they ran things. And it wasn't just SEC schools. And sometimes it's the simple things that you can improve upon. And so I always kept an eye open for that and took suggestions from the media.
Greg, thanks a lot, man. You can click out and go and do TPSD stuff if you like, or you can hang around as long as you like. We're going to get a little more Ole Miss and MSU centric here. Logan, let's start with Mississippi State, and obviously, as Greg mentioned, they have you got a couple of easier games out of the way. They've caught a Power 5 school on the road where they played extremely well. What do you see in the Bulldogs right now, and where can they get better as they go and face a Kentucky team that might be a little better than people thought at the beginning?
Well, I asked Luke Getsy, Mississippi State's offensive coordinator, and I'd say offensive coordinator in quotes because we all know Joe Moorhead's the guy that's calling the plays and stuff. But Luke Getsy, obviously, NFL background, he's Mississippi State's wide receivers coach. But I asked him that question last night: just where can this offense be better? They've been so good through these first 3 games. Just where can they be better? And he said it's just kind of the little things. I mean, obviously, penalties were sort of a problem early on in the season, and they cleaned that up last week against Louisiana Lafayette. But just some of that pre-snap penalty type stuff, they need to get cleaned up. Obviously, the completion percentage from Nick Fitzgerald was so much better in his second game against Louisiana Lafayette last week. I think he was 14 out of 21, and he was only at 40% in that Kansas State game. So, and on third down, he was absolutely brilliant on third down and made some tough throws. And it wasn't third and short type stuff. I mean, it was, there were some, penalties that brought them back. It was third and long and very long, and he was able to convert those third downs, keep the chains moving. Mississippi State scored touchdowns on their first 7 drives of that ball game. So that's being very, very efficient on the offensive side of the ball. And it was good to see Aris Williams, like Greg mentioned earlier. Aris Williams, did not play against Kansas State. He's a 1,000-yard back, a multi-year starter. And then when you bench a player like that, you don't really know how they're going to come back, if they're going to sull up and just give up. But Aris Williams, you could tell when that very first run that he got the other night, he seemed like he was just running with a purpose. And he ended up with 100 yards in that game. I think he finished with 101 yards. Nick Fitzgerald finished with a little over 100 yards on the ground as well. Nick Fitzgerald had 6 total touchdowns in that ball game. He had 4 rushing and 2 passing, and that offense is really just clicking. And that's not even mentioning Mississippi State's defense. I mean, obviously, they're as good, maybe even better than advertised. That front 7 is probably one of the best in the country. The defensive line probably is the best defensive line in the country. They're deep. They're talented at that spot. They've only given up 2 touchdowns all year, and both of those were on interceptions. They're on short fields. So they got the ball, with their backs were kind of against the wall, and they gave them both up through the air. They have not given up a rushing touchdown yet this season, and that's going to kind of be a matchup to watch this weekend when they play Kentucky, because that's what Kentucky does so well. Benny Snell, back there, one of the top backs in the SEC. They're going to go against him this weekend. He's kind of been running his mouth a little bit up there in Lexington and giving Mississippi State some bulletin board material, and that's kind of a neat storyline to kind of follow heading into the weekend.
Yeah, who started that Mississippi State Kentucky smack talk, man? I thought it started from Starkville first, or maybe I just came to be aware of it with a Kentucky response in there somewhere. How did all that come about?
Well, it started after the game the other night. They were asking Benny Snell about the next opponent, and he said that he's going to be able to run on anybody. He didn't care if it was an NFL team or what. That offense. I think the quote was something like that: "Our offense ain't scared of nobody," or something like that. And that was posted on Twitter, and Kylan Hill started putting a bunch of. I think he put 41 laughing emojis after that, and they kind of had a back and forth there. So it's going to be neat just to kind of see how all that kind of plays out. It's kind of a neat added storyline to that rivalry. I mean, Mississippi State's dominated this rivalry as of late. I think State's won 8 of the last 9 meetings against Kentucky. The only game that Kentucky's won in that series was the last time they went to Lexington. Kentucky kicked I think it was a 51-yard field goal on the last play of the game to win. So it's Mississippi State's dominated this series, for the last decade, and it's neat to have that added storyline. And of course, both teams going into this game undefeated at 3-0. Now, usually this game's played in late October, so this game's fallen earlier in the season. Kentucky's already got that 1 win down there in the swamp a couple of weeks ago, and this will be Mississippi State's first SEC game for Joe Moorhead.
All right. The Rebels are at home again this week, concluding a 3-game homestand against Kent State. And while they couldn't handle Nick Saban last week, losing 62-7 Alabama, maybe they can get one in against Saban's alma mater this week in Kent State. Logan, Greg's SEC shakedown touched on it earlier, pulled no punches. This defense is not good right now. And there's been an outcry against Wesley McGriff, the Ole Miss defensive coordinator. And, the first reaction is fire the coach, fire the coach, fire the coach. So you're hearing some of that. You're hearing some of that bubbling from discontent Ole Miss fans. Look, this defense has not looked good, okay? But there are 3 games on record now, and I go back to the Texas Tech game, the season opener, when this defense looked competitive. It looked functional, which is to say much improved from 2017. Not anywhere where it needs to be, but it looked like, a defense that could get a few stops and could help out its offense a little bit. Frankly, it has not looked that way the past 2 weeks. Both of these home games now on a neutral site against Texas Tech offense that really, Logan, again, they've gotten into some of their softer games a couple of weeks now, but they've been explosive. They've been the Texas Tech offense that you expect to see in terms of yards and points. So it's not like Ole Miss was playing a dog in that game. I think they were competitive against what's turning out to be and will be a good Texas Tech offense. But the last 2 weeks, Ole Miss, and particularly the first halves against Southern Illinois, an FCS opponent, and then against number 1 Alabama. So you got 2 pretty good extremes there to look at. You've got the team that you can say, oh, we overlooked them. And then you've got the best team in the country. But the result in the first 2 halves have been the same. In the first 2 quarters of the last 2 games, Ole Miss on 15 opponent offensive possessions, 15 times the defense is on the field for Ole Miss, 12 touchdowns by the opponents, and a field goal, okay? The only 2 drives in the first half by these opponents, when it was still a game, Ole Miss gets the ball in plus territory with a chance really to do something. It was 7-7 at the time. You got a chance to set the tone, send a message, and they go 3 and out. Can't advance the ball after a turnover in plus territory. That's on the offense. Defense got you a stop there, gave you the ball, okay? And then another was the Alabama offense with the drive and missing a field goal. So, look, it's been a rough first half for Ole Miss. The last 2 weeks, what we've heard from Matt Luke and these coaches is not so much scheme. We've got to do something different. That's not what we're hearing. We're hearing execution. We're hearing that players need to do the little things consistently, because when you don't do the little things, all of a sudden this is what you get. We're told when you have wrong hand placement by the offensive line, if you take a step a couple of feet the wrong way, these sort of things add up. You're out of position, things of that nature. So execution is what the Rebels hope to do better this week against Kent State. Matt Luke says they've had good work. First 2 big days of practice this week. They're off on Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday are big practice days, big days for getting in the game plan, really the most physical practices of the week. He likes the work that he's seen. He thinks his defense will play better from the start against Kent State. This is a game that the offense needs some mental healing as well. Remember, this was a dominant offense against Texas Tech and Southern Illinois, and all of a sudden, you're held to 248 yards by Alabama, 75 of them on one play, 11 seconds in, the long pass, Jordan Tiamu to DK Metcalf. Take that play away, and Ole Miss averaged 2.98 yards on 58 plays. Okay, they ran 59 plays in the game. On the other 58, 2.98 yards. This is that explosive offense. So this Kent State game is going to be important for these guys as well to get their swagger back and become confident again in what they're doing. And chances are they will against Kent State. Okay, but look, this team needs an explosive game against an upper tier SEC defense. That's what's been lacking. Okay, we got 8 games on record for offensive coordinator Phil Longo and Tiamu as quarterback. And you go back and look, Logan, Tiamu took over against Arkansas last year. They had 500 some odd yards of offense. He had a big day passing. They were explosive against Louisiana Lafayette, against Kentucky, which is an average SEC defense. Okay, as they finished last year, then explosive again this year against Texas Tech in the opener. 10 starters back. We'll see how they fare out defensively, but that's not what Texas Tech is known for. That's not their side of the ball. And then an FCS opponent, they put up 76 points, 2 defensive touchdowns in there, so 50 some odd points by the offense, lots of yards, 600 plus yards against Southern Illinois. But you get back to the upper tier SEC defense, Alabama, even though they're rebuilding with 4- and 5-star athletes on defense. And this was the result. 1 long touchdown and 2.98 yards per play on 58 other snaps. Going back to last year, again, you got 8 games to look at. The Mississippi State game, the Rebels were inconsistent, were unable to move consistently with the run game or the intermediate passing, but they were able to hit big plays. And they can hit big plays. And that's something that basically enabled them to win at Starkville last year. But as a whole, this offense, and it won't be this week, but I know they're eager for another chance to prove that they can move the ball and score against upper-level SEC defenses. And the next chance is not this week against Kent State, but the following week against LSU in Baton Rouge. And 8-15 starts. You know how much we enjoy those, Logan. Kent State should not be taken for granted, because nobody should be taken for granted by the Rebels, because it looks like anybody can move and score until they reverse that trend.
Yeah, and Greg mentioned a little bit earlier about Mississippi State's injuries. Really, the only significant injury Mississippi State has right now is cornerback Jamal Peters. He left that game with a left. Moorhead's calling it a left or a lower body injury, but we all saw his left leg and one of those immobilizers. He was on crutches at the end of that ball game in the second half. He's not going to play this week. Moorhead said he's week to week. Kylan Hill left that game, but in all indications, he returned to practice on Sunday. I asked Charles Huff, Mississippi State's running backs coach, last night, how Kylan's looked in practice, and he's like, he fell on his bottom. He said, how many times did he do that as a baby? So he'll be fine. He says he's been rocking and rolling in practice all week. So Kylan Hill will be back. Aris Williams, coming off that big game. Nick Fitzgerald with the running game. Mississippi State should be strong in the run game. Kentucky, strong run game. We'll have to see how that fares. I mean, Mississippi State beat Kentucky last year 45-7 in Starkville. Really wasn't much of a game at all. I think Kentucky had somewhere around 250 yards, and Benny Snell had 18 yards in that ball game. So I don't really know where this newfound confidence is that he has, but he didn't do much against Mississippi State last year.
Well, he's ready for the Dogs this year. Says he can run on anybody. So it's refreshing to see players express their true feelings every now and then. Injury update for Ole Miss. Look, a huge loss. They've got 2 season-ending losses in the secondary now. Lost Jalen Jones, arguably their best defensive back, the junior cornerback, in the Texas Tech game, to an ACL tear. And now Montrell Custis, a veteran who had not been able to crack the starting lineup, but did this year as a junior, as the nickelback, was playing well. The Rebels team leader in passes broken up. He goes down with an ACL tear, so he's gone for the season. That secondary that in the offseason Matt Luke was talking about is pretty deep, and hey, we're going to load the box and stop the run because we think these guys can cover and man coverage. Well, all of a sudden, there are depth issues in that secondary, and they're going to have to find some guys to make some plays there. Freshman Keydron Smith, a cornerback, has done well, so he'll get more snaps. I would not be surprised to see Miles Hartsfield get some work at that nickel back. He has been at corner. Offensively, Eric Swinney at running back will get back in the mix this week. He's been at practice, but I don't expect that to change much. Scotty Phillips is the man at running back for Ole Miss. They need to keep him healthy. If he's not, then that offense takes on a drastically different look, that running game anyway. So still a couple of weeks out, it looks like, from getting back Devon Penniman, their biggest back, a junior who was running really well at the end of last season in November when he sustained a dislocated kneecap against Texas A&M. So it'd be nice to get him back, but then again, you have to wonder, he'll have to get back in shape, and how effective can he be? So, hey, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We thank you for being with us today. Come back and join us next week.